But in making things too safe, too cozy, them not having enough challenges, they lose the fire in the belly, and they end up having more pain down the line.
In this episode of Wisdom, Wealth, and Wellness, host Jonathan Satovsky and guest Brian Whetten explore the challenges of authentic leadership, parenting, and wealth management. They discuss how to empower others without fostering entitlement, the psychological impact of abundance, and the importance of purpose beyond material success.
Welcome back to Wisdom, Wealth, and Wellness. I'm your host, Jonathan Satovsky. We often talk about wealth in financial terms, but true wealth is also about the richness of our relationships and the clarity of our leadership. Today, we're tackling a tension that I think every leader, parent, business owner feels. It's a fine line between empowerment, entitlement. How do we support our teams without enabling them? How do we lead with heart without losing our backbone? To help us navigate this, I'm joined by the great Brian Whetten. He's the author of Yes, Yes, Hell No, a thought leader in conscious business, and an expert on authentic leadership. I'm honored to know him, and a lot more to tell you about why he's so special, but welcome aboard, Brian.
Thank you, Jonathan.
So just a little slight tidbit about Brian, give you a little cheat sheet. This guy was a former Silicon Valley standout, PhD in computer science from Berkeley, raised $20 million from a startup, burnt out twice by the age of 30, but he pivoted to get a master's degree in spiritual psychology to understand why smart leaders make dumb decisions.
Having made many of my own dumb decisions.
So I'm grateful to have you. And I think we should start with a conversation diving right in to your work with executives, talking about authentic leadership and why it's so hard to be authentic and supportive without creating an accidental culture of entitlement.
Yeah. So sorry, let's back up just a second. The topic for today was going to be, how do we raise children that we give as wealth to, that we take care of their needs without creating entitlement and spoiled brats?
I think there's a parallel between the kids and employees.
Yeah,
so
it's a different set of problems. Like, it's a different through line.
Okay.
Let's start with the kids first.
Okay.
We can talk about leadership and teams tons. The pain point, I feel so acutely right now that nobody's talking to, is how we help our kids.
Okay.
And there's just so much struggling and drowning right now. I've got a 15-year-old and a turning 12-year-old this weekend. And, if you've got means and you've got money, how do you raise them well?
Okay.
And at least for me, this question, I get this a lot with my executive clients, right? I've got a lot of my clients have made a lot of money as startup entrepreneurs. That's sort of my bread and butter of who I work with. And their question is okay, what do I do with this money? How do I raise my kids? I've got teenagers. How do I help them not turn into spoiled brats? I want to give them everything. I want to fly private occasionally, because I want it. I want, and not everybody's going to have that level of a challenge, but it's our society right now actually has so much. We're living in the most abundant time in history. And particularly if you're in a position of authority, you're in a position of leadership, we're giving so much to our children. And how do we help them turn out well? What's been your experience of that with your clients over the years? I mean, you help them create wealth and wealth and wealth and wealth, and then their second generation, third generation, it's a problem.
It's a process, and each family has a different set of values and perspectives on, the Buffett idea. You want to give someone enough to help them get going, but not too much to disable them.
Right.
And that's a fine line that every family has to find And it's constantly moving based on the shift of, as you pointed out, the adults' desires and creating a discipline, a work ethic, a hunger in your child that you might have had coming up with nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like I've worked with enough clients now, and now I'm starting to work with the second generation. And it's this question of like, how do I define success? You know, you're a young man, 25, gone to great schools, been climbing the ladder, but like mom and dad won the game. And what am I going to do that's going to move the needle? Like, we talk about the right ideas and we don't want to spoil our kids and everything, but I don't see that many people doing it well. Like, I just see the problem showing up over and over and over again, despite our best ideas, despite our best wisdom, despite our best efforts. And so, like, I've been grappling with some of these questions fairly deeply with some of my clients, both first and second generation, from some time. And I thought it'd be fun to roll up our sleeves and chew on that a little bit together, because I know you've been wrestling with these questions with your clients for quite some time as well.
Brilliant. I love it. So let's dig in. I remember the defensive line Hall of Famer from Seattle, when his former psychology coach came to visit and he was living in Beverly Hills with his kids. He said, "How's it going?" He said, "It's great. I got everything." He goes, "So what's the problem?" He goes, "I screwed up." He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I gave my kids everything. I had nothing. I came from nothing. I had this hunger and fire in the belly that drove me every single day to be able to accomplish stuff because I had nothing and I wanted it all. Now I have it all and I want to give them everything and not have them experience the pain I have. And protecting them from that pain disabled their fire in the belly that I had."
That's it. That's it. So that tension between you want to save them from their pain, like that's the deepest instinct as a parent, right? My daughters are going through their own sets of challenges as teenagers. Everybody has their teenage issues. And like my heart wants to do anything I possibly can to take their pain away. But in making things too safe, too cozy, them not having enough challenges, they lose the fire in the belly and they end up having more pain down the line. And so I've been thinking a lot lately and talking a lot about a critical distinction. Like you and I know that critical distinctions are the pivot points that we can really create movement around. And this distinction between problems of lack and problems of excess. And if you look at our society for the last tens of thousands of years, almost everything by almost everybody has been problems of lack. We've had too little safety, too little wealth, too little capital, too little opportunity. In society today, just in general, in the United States, it is much more likely that you're going to die of suicide than homicide. It's much more likely that you're going to die of diabetes and being overweight, obesity, than starvation. And children who end up depressed, anxious, unhappy in life, oftentimes the far greater risk is that they were raised with too much, not too little. And our society hasn't caught up to that yet. We're still so wired to see everything through the lens of lack and scarcity. Lack and scarcity. The problem must be lack. We must not have enough. It's so hardwired in our genes for thousands upon thousands of years. It's like the whole world just shifted on us in the last 20, 30 years, and we're still waking up to even notice that something had changed. How does that match with your experience?
There is a concept, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations.
Right.
And it's a very prevalent thing where that in the second generation, 70% of wealth is destroyed. And in the third generation, 90%. We've been fortunate, knowing this, being conscious of this as a wealth management firm, trying to serve multi-generational families, that over 3 decades, we've been very blessed and fortunate to have 98% retention with first, second, third, and fourth generation family members, because we've been educating them and trying to build the discipline, habits, principles, spend rate, lifestyle drift, educating them on the things beyond just investing to try to set a solid foundation to unlock their creativity and their thinking. That's our passion. That's what we try to unlock, which we feel like is the greatest gift that we can give to families to reduce the financial stress and anxiety of never enough, as you pointed out, or inadequacy of not measuring.
That's it. Yep. So, but those are in direct tension. So that inadequacy of never measuring up, right? There's this paradox where the better you do in helping preserve and grow wealth as you pass it down from generation to generation, the harder it is for the younger generations to feel enough, right? At a very deep psychological level. It's not due to you. It's not due to their parents. Like, it's raw human dynamics. And I've seen this pattern enough now that the way I would say it, like, there was a client I was working with a couple of years ago, and his comment was, look, my family won the game and my parents just raised me with everything. But deep down, I don't feel like it's possible for me to win. I don't feel like there's any way I can ever stand on my parents' shoulders. Like, I feel like as souls, as spiritual beings having a human experience, we're here to do better than our parents. We're not just here to make money. We're not just here to buy things or go to good schools. We're here to stand on our parents' shoulders. And that's hard if it looks like your parents already won the game. And it's like, where do I go from there? So this question of how does the game change? And our schools aren't doing it. Our therapists aren't doing it. Our society isn't doing it. Lord knows TikTok and YouTube isn't doing it. They're still celebrating more. We live in a culture of excess that celebrates more is always better. But after a point, more starts becoming difficult in very specific ways. Like my client who's in Newport Beach, just as an example, he's got this beautiful home on the beach, his own yacht and plane, and is doing very well. He doesn't want his kids to turn out like his neighbor. His neighbor is second generation wealth, has his beautiful home on the beach, and is an alcoholic, and has given up on life because there was nothing he could do that would ever make him feel fulfilled inside.
So one of the things I've witnessed that has been a recurring theme of what you're describing, and this doesn't just happen of second generation wealth, it happens when someone sells a business and has more than they ever thought they were going to have.
Yes.
The issue is the David or Arthur Brooks concept, strength to strength, or second mountain.
Yes.
Is how do you devote your time, energy, talents, and capacity to eudonic work versus hedonistic pleasure? And what I'm understanding, and I don't remember the source of this exactly, but when you study the RNA in the bloodstream, if you do something hedonistic for yourself, it changes your bloodstream for a day. If you do something eudonic where you're helping others, it changes your bloodstream for a week. So if you can use your talents, energy, and attention for the next 25 years instead of accumulating stuff,
right,
but using your resources that you've been gifted with, knowledge, money, time, whatever it is that you have, and everyone has something to give to bring light to other people.
That's it. So that's the window of opportunity.
Yeah.
And now notice there's a distinction between exactly what you said. The entrepreneur who sold and is now sitting on large amounts of wealth, right? I have a client right now like that. Recent exit from 3 years ago, reinventing his life now, right? Versus though, to get to the second mountain, you still have to climb the first mountain. There was this phenomenal comment from M. Scott Peck in The Road Less Traveled, which dates me. Like, I don't know if anybody reads that book anymore, but it's one of my all-time favorites. And he says, if you give up winning before you've won, you're still what you were at the beginning, a loser. So in order to develop, children need to have a way of winning. And then we also need to build a bridge that keeps them going to the second mountain. And as entrepreneurs who've sold their company, we need to build that bridge to the second mountain and then help them do the same thing for their kids. And I don't see hardly any role models or pathways right now that are doing that as a common basis. I think you're one of the leaders. I think you're one of the absolute cutting edge professionals.
Wow.
Helping
I
ask
never
this
heard
question.
that before. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Wow. I didn't realize I had a superpower.
No, I mean, you've taken the stand. I'm not trying to blow your ego up, but you took a stand early in your industry for moving from money management to wealth management. And lots of people say those words. Very few people that I've met actually dig in and do anything about it. There's a lot of platitudes paid to that idea, right? But again, I was talking to somebody recently, second generation wealth, and he's like, yeah, I've sat down with all of my big, Goldman Sachs and whatever wealth management, and they have all these trainings, and they'll sit me down. And basically the message from every training is just shut up, stay in your lane, let us manage your money for you so you don't screw it up. You go live your life and we'll take care of everything else. And he's like, that's very disempowering. Like, I can't, it's yet one more way that I'm being told that the game's already won. And my job is to just sort of find some way to occupy my time until I die. Like, what am I supposed to do with that?
So they aren't trained on deeper conversations of how do we really dig deep. I actually spoke to an entrepreneur yesterday, sold a business for 38 million. And he, 46 years old, more than he ever dreamed he'd have. And he's losing his mind.
Yes.
And I said, let me ask you a question. Do you ever meditate, journal, take a walk in nature? Do you ever spend time without any inputs, unplugging from your phone, and really think deeply about the things that light you up and the people's lives that you want to contribute to? And his first quick response was, I don't do that shit.
Right.
And I said, do you mind if I challenge you in a confrontational way? The fact that you're calling it shit is dismissive that it might be helpful to you. It's actually free. I'm not charging you anything. No one's selling you anything to meditate, to journal, to look inside yourself.
Yes.
Search inside yourself. And you're completely opposed to that woo-woo concept because you're afraid to look inside.
Right. Okay. And then there's another step past that. You're on it, which is even if they do look inside, then spirituality often starts becoming yet another form of achievement. So we're seeing this a ton right now in Silicon Valley, in Wall Street. Like, there's actually a huge shift happening in the 20-something, 30-somethings who are making money at a relatively young age and then are starting to say, okay, well, I'm going to wake up. I'm actually going to meditate. And they turn that into a competition. How do I speed run through the jhanas? How do I get to enlightenment as fast as possible? Their self-worth still gets measured based on now awareness rather than financial achievement. Right? And so, and again, a lot of the second generation are getting like pulled into Burning Man, and then they start doing ayahuasca and they have a flash of insight and they start meditating, but there's still this huge hole inside that everything's sort of masking and trying to cover up.
So the question I have for you is, how does people, going back to your spirituality, your PhD in spirituality,
Masters,
how do people establish meaning in the world of spirituality? Because it's my understanding that there's a vast gap between spirituality and religion. I'm not saying one's better than the other.
Yep.
But my slight understanding is there's a community around religion and faith, and spirituality is less communal. It's an individual path.
Yes, and it has usually less of a focus on service. So just what you were talking about, that second bound is anchored in contribution, service, and creating value for the world. But we can't just wave our hands and say, go do service work. There's actually a whole developmental pathway people have to figure out how to navigate in order to be able to be a centered person who feels good about yourself, that's actually making a difference in the world and feeling like you've both won the game enough, You've taken care of your success needs, and you're also standing on top of that and living a life of service.
Nine out of 10 people that I experience are spending most of their energy naturally doing things because they feel like they need to do it.
Yes.
Not because they want to do it. It's a get to versus got to.
Yes.
And that leads me to a really profound thought is like, how do you, assume all your money issues weren't an issue. How would you spend your time in creative energy? Because I think what really separates humans from computers, particularly in the accelerating age of AI and artificial general intelligence, is our ability to think and be creative. And every single one of the 8 billion people on the planet have some innate gift to contribute to the world. But if they can't quiet their mind for 15 minutes alone in a room, never going to happen.
Totally. So that's the solution. We're starting to find the pieces, and meditation is absolutely one of the critical pieces. And I've been meditating for 20 plus years. It's a phenomenal practice, right? And I love spirituality. I love religion. I love all of this. This core, and I'm seeing people still fail. And when I see that pattern where people are doing the right things and then they're still getting stuck, their kids are getting stuck, I get curious. I get stubborn in that way. I'm just like, Nicole, my wife describes me as 3 golden retrievers at once when I see, a hard question to go chewing on. So let's take a step back, and I want to talk about this from a couple different directions. So I want to talk about it from the perspective of power, and I want to talk about it from the perspective of needs. So the other thing I do a lot of with leaders is the question of power and corruption of power. Right? Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And any wise leader is concerned about how do they handle their power. Right? Unwise leaders assume, well, that happens to bad people. Those people get corrupted by power. I will never be corrupted by power. That's silly. The technical word for that is stupid. We see that as a pattern of stupidity that causes a pain. But then if we get into this question of, okay, how do we honor our power? Okay, we've been in this question of what is leadership for a long time. And the tightest definition we found for leadership is the capacity to turn wealth and power into value. How do we create value with the power and wealth that we've been given? Right? And the default answer in capitalism is, just put it in the market and we'll trust that the market, if it's creating more profits, must be creating value. Maybe that works, maybe it doesn't, but it doesn't speak to the soul in a grounded way. And so this question of how do we grow the capacity to take the resources you've been given? This client, second generation, he's got a nice trust fund, but he's going to be handed a very large amount of money at some point in time. And how is he going to handle the responsibility of that wealth? Right? How is he going to develop enough capacity in himself to use that wealth for good in some way? That doesn't have to mean that he's got to create some philanthropy or startup or something, but to be in that question honestly. Okay, if I've been given $100 million or $10 million or even the best education that money can buy, how do I use the gifts I've been given to create value for society? And one of the great sins of capitalism in its current form, the great mistakes, is at its core, the foundations of economics assumes that price and value are the same thing. Value is what the market will pay for it. If I'm being paid $10 million, I must be creating at least $10 million of value. If I'm only being paid $100, I must not be providing very much value. They're not the same thing. But that's almost heretical to mention, in polite company. So how do we separate the conversation to, well, what is value? What is value to me? What are my values? What are your values? Right. This is what Arthur Brooks and David Brooks are both trying to point towards in different ways. Does that make sense?
It does. And what I think, what it makes me think about is the idea of lecturing someone about valuings or embodying values. So I was lectured a lot when I was young, and I hate being lectured. I would front run the end of a sentence because I know what you're about to say, whatever it is. And so as maybe you cross the 50-year-old lexicon, the Kabbalistic concept is that you start to awaken a little bit and be much more curious about your self-awareness, your boundaries, and all this stuff. And I just heard recently that, and I have no way to validate this, but 98% of children are geniuses, and only 2% of adults are measured as geniuses.
Okay.
And the reason why is because they lose that innate curiosity, that sense of wonderment, and fear starts to box them into their definition of whatever it is, rather than being open to unlimited possibilities.
Right. So our current society, if we deal with the system as it is wired as a deep meritocracy where from a very young age, particularly in affluent families, everything is hyper competitive. How are you doing at soccer? How are you doing at school? Are you going to get into the top university? How are you winning? Even like vacations. Where did you vacation at? Everything can start becoming a competitive sport in our society today. It doesn't have to, but it's the default. If the parents don't find some way to resist that,
yeah,
right? If we don't find some stronger thing we're standing for, the default for every adult and every children in our society is to get trapped on Success Mountain. There's never enough, never enough, never enough. I've got to be climbing, climbing, climbing. And we can speak platitudes, but it won't matter because the system is built for never enough, never enough, never enough.
So what's the solution?
So this is a great question. I don't have all the solution. It's a worthy question to me. It's a question worth being in and spending time on. One of the keys is really understanding human needs. So we spent a lot of time starting with Maslow, and then Tony Robbins improved on Maslow, and then we realized that there were a few missing pieces there, so we improved on Tony Robbins, hopefully. And the idea is that there's 4 basic human needs. These are the basic human needs that Maslow called out. In Tony Robbins' language, his modified form, there's safety and certainty, pleasure and variety, belonging and approval, significance and achievement. Okay? And this is the most important one in many ways. How do you feel special? Everyone needs their special. If you're in a high achieving, high affluent community, your safety and pleasure needs are pretty handled. These are just sort of a given. And it's really about belonging and achievement. And there's this deep need to feel special, to have earned your special some way. So I believe every child has something special in them, not necessarily that they're the best in the world at, but some calling pulling them forward in terms of a special way that they can create value in the world. Right? My 15-year-old daughter, who's struggling as a sophomore and taking all the hardest classes and wants to get into the best schools, and if not, she's a failure in her own mind. We keep trying to bring her back to reality. I just keep repeating, honey, there is a purpose that you are put here on earth to do. There is some form of value that you're here to create. And you may not find that for 30 years. But it's my job as your dad to hold for that question. What is the value you can create that is unique and special to you? Okay, so that involves pulling her up to this second octave of needs. So each of these basic 4 have a higher flavor, the soul needs. The best way the highest form of pleasure I've found is creativity. The highest form of belonging and approval is mature love, deep loving relationships. The best way to create safety and certainty, like for a business, is through growth. If the company is growing, it's safe. When it stops swimming, the shark dies. Right? And the best way to create significance and achievement is by contribution, service, creating value. Now, if we don't get these needs met cleanly, we start falling into addiction. And the addictive form of pleasure and variety is craving. Alcoholism, obesity, all the standard, this is 12-step. Our society's dealt with this one for a long time, right? Oftentimes, we see a lot of alcoholism and other addictions because people aren't getting their needs met here cleanly, and they fall down rather than move up, right? A addictive form of safety and certainty is control. We start becoming hyper controlling about every risk, right? There was an interview I saw with one of the Disney heiresses, and she said, as a trust fund child, she went around and talked to a lot of the other trust fund children, and she asked them a question. She said, how much money would be enough for you? And the answer was always the same, almost. Twice as much as I have today. Because that would allow me to lose everything and still have what I have. Like, I need yet one more insurance plan. Then I'll feel safe. That's control. That's not reality-based. That's addiction, right? The addictive form of approval and belonging is conformance. We start chasing likes on Facebook. We start giving up who we are in order to have other people approve of us. And the addictive form of significance and achievement is superiority and dominance. We start putting other people down. We judge other people as less than us in order to try to make ourselves feel better. Right? So as parents, how do we help our children meet these needs cleanly? As entrepreneurs who've just sold our company, we had all of these needs being met when we were building a company, and all of a sudden it's gone. And it's empty, and there's this hole inside because we're not doing anything to be special anymore. We just have this pot of money. We're not actually earning or achieving or creating special each day. We're just sitting there with a bank account. Okay, it's not active, it's passive. And so it doesn't actively fill the needs. So how do we help our children and help ourselves meet these needs cleanly? Watch for these. Anytime one of these shows up, it's always a sign that one of these isn't being met fully and cleanly. And again, I think the hardest one for high affluent families is significance and achievement. How do you create honest special rather than just participation awards for everybody? Right? Or status-based, oh, well, because we have money and we won the game, we're superior, which is dropping back down into addiction. How do we move up the food chain into service? What you're saying, growth. How do we get into meditation? How do we do deep personal growth? How do we build deep, loving relationships? Oftentimes, art or other forms of creativity.
So that's awesome. Great contribution there. Thank you for my audience. Thank you to my audience for being able to expose them to these concepts. What I have observed, you talk about, I know you don't want to talk about kids, but you often say business is a spiritual dojo. Is it fair to say parenting is an advanced class? How do you stop enabling our kids in the name of love?
Absolutely.
And so what I see, what I've witnessed, we just did an exercise as a team, like a personality profiling, Myers-Briggs, DISC, all these different things. We did something called Working Genius.
Beautiful, yes.
And the concept, Pat Lencioni, whatever, 5 dysfunctions of a team, is that everyone has a genius zone and a frustration zone. So my genius zone might be wonder and innovation. Some of my team members may absolutely be frustrated when I'm brainstorming. That level of collective awareness of where people get energy or lose energy is, in my effort, desire to build a culture of people that can thrive.
Yes.
And then they feel energized. They feel like they're of significance and contribution, and they're getting energy in every activity they're doing and shedding the things that are draining.
That's it. That's a great example. So in my language, that's you stepping in, helping people understand what's genuinely special about them. What are their zones of genius? What's their honest special? So that they can create more value for the organization. And also they can grow and improve themselves. They can have honest, deep connections with the team members. When they're in their zone of genius, they can have more creativity. All good things happen when you're in your zone of genius. That's a fantastic example.
So some people in an organization, they were all theoretically forced to partake. But in a family, everyone's not forced to partake. Or in a relationship with a significant other, they may or may not want to partake in that woo-woo stuff. And I think your point about mature love is honoring one another's genius and pain points.
Yep.
If you really love the other person, you would want to help them flourish and not keep bumping into their trigger zones.
Yes.
And I don't think many people are even making an effort consciously to spend much time here.
Yes, I agree. So that's a fantastic pathway.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the enablement trap, the heroic parent. You know, in your work, you talk about how leaders burn out by trying to fix everything. As parents, it's painful to watch as our kids struggle or fail. You know, how do you distinguish, in your opinion or experience or what you see, between supporting a child or enabling a child?
It's a great question. And again, my kids are 50 and 12, so ask me again when they're 30 and 27. I regularly feel like I'm enabling them and failing on this one. So I don't claim to be an expert. One of my things I stand for is questions matter more than the answers. Right. So I think it's an important question. For me, I will say, I feel like when I allow my daughters to get too sucked into society's defaults, like the default definition of what success is. Annabelle, our oldest, is, in a reasonably solid high school, and she's in the high honors classes, and all of her classmates are like stress monsters who, if they get a single B, their life is over. And how do I stand for the question with her of, well, is that really what you want? Is that your sole truth? Or is that you getting sucked into somebody else's story? How do I help her find what she really cares about? What are her honest needs? What actually fills her up here and here? Even if I don't necessarily know, but being willing to stay in the hard questions with her.
Right.
And I think parenting in our society is often the heroic parent. I climbed the mountain. I won the game. I've made all this money. I'm doing well. I'm an executive. I need to have all the answers as a parent. I need to do it right. It's the most loving instinct. I have that too. And, I think particularly as parents, both as parents and leaders, the questions matter 100 times more than the answers.
Well, I got a lot of questions. Good for me.
Exactly.
So, cost of comfort, in an age of unprecedented convenience, it seems like parents constantly remove obstacles. It's like the lawnmower parent. We're actually robbing our children of the emotional muscle they need to avoid entitlement. So I asked some of my team members today, how many times have you failed today? How do you put yourself in a position where that you experience pain?
Yes.
Because that's where the learning happens. But it's really hard to put people in those positions.
That's it.
To feel the pain and sit in it.
Yep.
And be okay with it. You can't remove the pain. As you know, like 70% of the population is on some opiates because they want to numb the pain.
Right. That's it. So now there's two different types of pain. There's the pain of suffering and struggle that often feels unproductive or is driven by stress and not enoughness or trauma. And then there's the good pain of being stretched in a way that makes you better and that you actually want in some way. So, for example, our one daughter, my wife managed to convince her to do karate for a year when she was like 10 years old, and she was weak and very meek, very, very, very kind, but not necessarily strong. She hated it, but she is so grateful for that experience now because it toughened her up. It gave her a muscle. Now, that way we pushed her a little bit. In general, we're trying to find, well, what are the things she genuinely cares about that we can help her set what we call yes, says hell, no goals for. Goals that are exciting and heartfelt, specific and scary. And that the pain comes out of confronting her fears, or like what you said, how many times have you failed today? The willingness to go after goals that scare you and that you're going to fail at regularly, that's good pain.
Yeah.
Can't be just empty goals that society puts a stamp on, like, hey, you've got to get into Harvard or Stanford or you're a failure. It's got to be the goals that they genuinely care about. What does their soul sing over?
Unfortunately, I would say most people aren't tuned into that.
True. But particularly for children, if you hold space for the question long enough, that comment of like 98% of kids are genius because they're tapped into their soul still. They know what their heart wants. So how do we keep the questions alive that matter?
It's so interesting. You know about heart rate variability and, meditating into the heart, like measuring your coherence. I learned about this, and this is a fascinating thing. Like horses can feel your energy from, 10 meters away or whatever. And human heart emits a certain energy magnetism that people are not always conscious of, the energy they're putting into the world. So it's tapping back into that is a form of meditation and a mindfulness that people can really make a profound leap to cover that chasm of awareness.
Yes.
That is not easily tapped into because they've been so sucked into everyone else's story.
Yep. And then one of the gifts that shows up, sorry, let me just riff on that because that's you're on something so good there.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, like meditation and all of this stuff is a little like eat your broccoli. Hey, you should go just sit and stare at a wall for 10 hours. It would be good for you. I'm guilty of prescribing things that way to people, as opposed to, again, helping connect to what people most want, drawing out from within the things that they genuinely care about. And then over time, one of the gifts of meditation, of all shadow work, of any self-development, of leadership development, is that you start being able to feel more of what you could feel as a child, which is feeling the purpose lines that are pulling you forward. So in my experience, we talk about purpose, my wife and I, in 3 primary contexts. 4. The negative version of purpose is what society usually holds as purpose, which is rescuing victims. And so much of our society right now is in like this victim Olympics where we're arguing over who's the biggest victims so that we can try to, is the left better, the right better? And it's all this big argument over who needs to be rescued. That's a very low form of purpose, particularly in an affluent society. A higher form of purpose is setting purposeful goals. Yes, that's hell no goals. That's what the book is about. Another form is the higher needs. Anytime that you're in an experience of mature love, contribution, growth, or creativity, you're on purpose. So I say that you can bring purpose to any organization, any leadership team, any family by being in the question of your purpose-driven needs. And then the highest form of purpose we talk about, and Nicole and I both feel this in different ways after having done a lot of work over the years and helped our clients do this work, is it's like the future starts pulling backwards and inviting something forward. We talk about like muses, or how, I forget, it was Mozart who just heard the music and wrote it down. Like, I think all of us have that ability. And a lot of the most successful entrepreneurs that we've worked with, they actually have a purpose line that they're not usually aware of, that's pulling them forward, giving them inspiration, helping them build a company that makes the world better in some way. The best parents have some line of purpose energy. They're actually being fed answers to the questions when they sit in them long enough. And with our children, I believe every child is wired to be able to find purpose that wants to work with them and help make them better, help make them able to contribute more in the world.
So building on that solution focus, I would call it the entitlement solution. Let's get back to your authentic responsibility. using your tools to build character.
Yes.
Let's reframe this and say entitlement is often just a refusal to take responsibility for one's own experience.
That's it.
So how can a parent use principles to teach a child that they are the creators of their own happiness, not the parent?
Yep. And again, so even there's a subtlety there. Particularly as they become teenagers, it becomes less about teaching. Just like you said, when people start teaching at you, we tend to shut down. Modeling is better. And then really it's about how do we hold for the questions, right? What is it that you value genuinely as a 15-year-old? You may not know. You may not know for 10 years. I don't know. But how can I sit in that question with you on a regular basis? What is the purpose that's going to pull you? What are your values that matter most to you? Right? We have this belief that everything should have an answer in our society. You go to Google and you type in a question and you're given an answer. Right? One of the biggest mistakes in our society right now as a whole is we've lost the distinction between what we call technical problems and developmental problems. Technical problems are things that can be solved by looking up the answer on Google. Oh, there's the answer. I want to be a good parent. Well, there's the answer Google told me. Developmental problems are leadership challenges. They're ways that you have to grow yourself to be able to hold the answers. Right? Parents that don't enable their children are themselves needing to stretch and stretch and stretch. We have to constantly be growing to hold for the hard questions. All right, we say learning is when you pour water in a cup. Development is when you grow the size of the cup. Holding for these types of questions are developmental problems. There aren't simple answers, but being willing to suffer the question.
Your hell no in parenting. Your book, yes, hell no. Many parents are terrified to say no because they want to be liked by their kids. So how can a parent use the hell no as a boundary? And I think boundaries are important that are actually make a child feel safer and less entitled.
Great question. So in the context of the book, the hell no is the voice of fear. So we say that the best way to make a decision is when your intuition and heart say go forward. Your mind and reason checks it out and says it's not crazy. I'm not physically jumping off of a cliff, even if it might feel like a cliff. And the voice of fear says hell no, run away. So as parents, we're given yes as hell no opportunities all the times with our children, such as when we cave in and get them to shut up by enabling them and instead of setting a boundary and saying no. And so that place inside, it's like noticing the fear of not being liked, noticing the fear of your kid throwing a tantrum, noticing the fear of conflict in the family, notice the fear of your own judgments of, I'm not going to be a good parent and I'm going to feel bad about myself. The more that we can learn to notice those fears, the whole point of that yes, this hell no framework is that you want there to be a hell no inside. You want to be scared about losing their approval. You want to be afraid about being a bad parent. That actually means you're on the right course potentially, right? That in the absence of a real and present danger, fear is an almost perfect indicator of which way to go, as long as you do the opposite of what it says. It says the compass needle is the North Pole. The North Pole of the compass needle is your purpose and your intuition. The South Pole is fear. It's often a lot harder to hear the purpose, but fear is easy. But we've been trained to understand fear wrong. Fear is the dragon we have to kill. It's the beast we must conquer. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death. Fear is the thing that I have to tame. No, fear is part of your guidance system. And as parents, how do you embrace your fears of being a bad parent? How do you listen to them? How do you work with them? Is one of the most powerful tools for being a better parent.
So we talk about wisdom, wealth, and wellness in this podcast, and I'm going to touch on each of them with a little different angle on the topic we're talking about. In wisdom, we'll talk about the long game. If we look at wisdom as playing the long game, sometimes letting a child fail a test, miss the team is the wisest thing we could do. But however, how does a parent deal with their own anxiety in the moment they don't intervene?
That's it. So as a concrete tool, buy the book, go to chapter 32, learn how to practice that skill.
That's good. That's good. All right. Let's talk about wealth and legacy. True wealth isn't just about money, we all know. Well, some of us know. It's the character and legacy we leave behind. You know, I remember someone saying, you know, when you start as dust, you end as dust, all you have is your good name in between. So the listener's worried that they've already spoiled a child. Is it too late? What's the first step in reversing entitlement today? I mean, I've seen 80-year-olds spoil 60-year-olds, you know.
Yep, totally. So to me, it always comes back to needs and values as the starting point, and then purpose, right? So, and needs are the pathway into purpose. Okay. So usually when somebody's spoiled, they're looping out in these addictive behaviors, and one of them begets the other. But rather than just try to conquer the addictions, right? Like, for example, there's a high net worth family that I'm just connected to. And the grandchildren, the third generation, are becoming very entitled, and they are doing a lot of superiority where, oh, I have more money, therefore I'm better than the other people around me. Particularly, you know, in their 20s, there's a lot of negative patterning there. Because I could buy anything I want, therefore I'm special in some way. But rather than fight that, how do we take that and up-level it? Okay, they've got a positive need, which is they need to feel special. How do we be in the question then? Okay, well, what's the value you're going to create in life? Right? This question of what value are you going to create is the master question of parenting, I think. One of them. One of the most important things to sit in with your children over and over and over. What value are you creating today? What value are you going to create tomorrow? And the value could be as simple as smiling to someone at the grocery store. You don't have to go to Harvard and get 17 degrees or start $1 billion foundation. You can create value in 1,000 ways.
That's my moda on me. I wake up every morning, you know, I don't know why you woke me, but you woke me today. I got to bring good energy and make someone laugh or smile today. If I did that, that's the measure of a good day. That's the only thing I can
That's it. That's it. Yeah. That question, right? That's you waking up with a good question every day.
Yeah. All right, let's get to wellness, emotional health. You mentioned stress is a polite name for fear. When we see our kids acting entitled, it often triggers our fear they won't make it. You know, how do we manage our own fear so we don't project it onto them?
Yep. And I would say there's two sides of this question. One is how do we manage our fear? Then how do we handle their stress and our own stress addiction? Okay. So let's do the stress addiction first. One of the most fascinating things that I do in companies, I did this with your Vistage group. That's how you and I connected the first time, was talking about fear and stress. And the fascinating thing is that fear is this 4-letter word that we never talk about in companies. Right? As a CEO, you are not allowed to speak of your fear. Stress is a given. It's an addiction. It's a badge of honor. We're supposed to be stressed, but we're not allowed to talk about fear. Biologically, they're the same thing. Stress is a self-created fear of failure or some other negative consequence that we use to try to create adrenaline and endorphins to get us to move forward. In our society, we've all become stress addicts in general. If you're a high achiever, high achievement and stress addiction go hand in hand. And particularly in the school system, the schools are so mismatched for our kids in so many ways that the only way to succeed in most cases is to become a deep stress addict using fear of failure to drive yourself forward. So this question of how do we up-level the fuel source, which requires better habits, it requires more connection to purpose. Again, we keep coming back to higher needs to fuel you rather than dropping down into fear and stress addiction. And then the other side of this is, okay, and then how do I deal with my own fears? And this core thing we say in chapter 32 of the book, this master tool is making friends with your fears. So there's actually two types of courage, and our society only really recognizes one. The first type of courage is the courage to conquer. It's the warrior with sword and shield who slays the dragon and rescues the princess or prince or stray animal or whatever it is in the story today. But there's a conquering that happens. And in the face of a real and present danger, which is tied to problems of lack, the courage to conquer is paramount. But if we're not facing a real and present danger, then most of what we're dealing with is the courage to change, the courage to grow, the courage to improve. And anytime you're growing, changing, and improving, you're leaving your comfort zone. And biologically, we're wired not to change or to change very slowly. This homeostasis thing kicks in. And so at a very, very deep level, any change is scary. So we're just as scared of positive change as negative change. And so if we're scared of becoming a better parent or a worse parent, it's two sides of the same coin. In both cases, we actually have to develop the courage to change, not the courage to conquer. And that requires changing our relationship to fear. Instead of fear being the bad guy we have to fight, there's specific processes and tools for how you partner with it. It's like a marriage counseling between your neocortex and your amygdala, your base, the base stem of your spine. How do we start getting those two pieces of your brain cooperating together each day would be the fundamental practice at the heart of what you're pointing towards.
I'm told that left to our own devices, most people slip back into the fight or flight part of their brain. And most of technology is designed to push them into that arena.
Yes.
So many people aren't aware of that. And because they're not aware of that, they just get seduced into that and then wonder why they aren't in their high level of creative thinking and contribution.
Absolutely.
And so how do you, and hopefully some people listen to this podcast and might glean something out of it, that even the concept of Shabbat, unplugging one day a week, could get them back to that higher level of creativity and conscious contribution.
Yep.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's my takeaway. So let me try to tie this together in some golden nuggets here. Couple pieces of advice for parents or leaders. I know you only wanted to talk about kids, but I think there's a big parallel between the Absolutely. Kids and employees. If you were to give one piece of advice to a parent who is currently afraid to set a hard boundary with a teenager, what would it be?
Get curious about their needs, wants, and values. Every piece of every person always has a positive purpose that is trying to achieve the best way it knows how. So your teenager that's acting out in some way you don't understand, there's a positive purpose behind every action. But if it's not expressed constructively, it turns into a negative pattern, right? So these down here are all negative patterns. They're feedback loops. They're vicious cycles that become unproductive. But if they're doing something down here, it's almost always because they've got a need up here that's not being met. And if you try to come down hard on them first and set a hard boundary before you understand the positive purpose behind their actions, then you're escalating the conflict and just creating more rebellion. And they're creating more, even if you win the battle, you're actually not feeding the core problem, which is that there's a hole inside them that they're trying to figure out how to fill.
You got me thinking about something. The shift from being nice to real.
Yes.
Many of us confuse being loving with being nice. And you argue that authentic leadership and parenting isn't about being nice. It's about being real.
And kind.
So can you leave us with a final thought on why being willing to feel the fear of disconnection in the short term is the only way to build true connection in the long run?
Beautiful. Yeah. So in your language, when you're addicted to connection, when there's that hunger inside that just has to do anything and you're afraid of losing connection, that's the addiction side of the equation. That's conformance. That's doing whatever. Niceness is conformance. It's sacrificing reality and what's real and what's loving in order to conform to someone's expectations. Okay, that creates negative addictions. Full stop. But again, every addiction has a positive purpose. Find the positive purpose. Find clean ways of getting it met there. one of my favorite examples for that need of like my need to belong, my need to feel good, was particularly when the girls were a little younger. I'd have a hard day at work and I'd come out of my office and I'd say, girls, can you just cheer for daddy? And they would just jump up and down, having the time of their life. Yay, daddy, you're the best. We love you, daddy, you're amazing. And it would like fill my cup. I'd feel special and connected. My girls love me. They think I'm the best daddy ever. And I have a deep connection to them. Wow. Oh, I got my needs met. So we're trained to think that needy is selfish, that as parents, we should sacrifice our needs, that we should draw hard boundaries. No, in order to, if the oxygen masks drop, put your own oxygen mask on first. You got to fill your own cup and give from the overflow. Like one of the most foundational things we do with leaders, with teams, with parents, with kids, with everybody is, what do you genuinely need? And how do we find the most productive ways possible of getting those needs met? Cleanly, positively, explicitly.
Wow. This has been an absolute masterclass in navigating the intersection of love, fear, and leadership, parenting. Where's the best place for people to find you? Yes, hell no, great book.
Yep. Go to corecoaching.org. Yep.
corecoaching.org.
Or
and learn more about Authentic Leadership Academy. I don't know if you still do that, and follow up on your work, because it's brilliant.
Thank you.
Is that all at corecoaching.org?
We actually we're halfway through a 3-month Authentic Leadership training, and we're trying to decide if we're going to do another 1-year program next year.
Amazing. I mean, wow.
If this has resonated with people, let me make that a specific request.
Yeah.
If there's a deep resonance, because Nicole and I are limited in the different ways we can help. We try to, like you, we wake up each day in the question of, how do we maximize our value contribution? Okay. And we actually have too many choices. We're like the donkey with the bales of hay and many opportunities. And so like a lot of what we do these days is demand driven. And most of our energy is being put into writing some books, because that feels more scalable ways of getting this stuff out there. I'm particularly excited about the book Nicole's working on called Surviving Your Superpowers. And there's all sorts of great stuff. But the authentic leadership stuff is really valuable. And so all this is to say, if this stuff calls to you, send us an email saying, hey, this really spoke to me. If you could do more of this, I'd really be interested. And if we had enough people say yes to that, then that would make it a lot easier to put a program together next year.
Cool. Well, I was a beneficiary, 5 years ago, and had an amazing exposure to connecting the dots to authentic leadership and the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, and Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, and every connection you can make to try to embed yourself in understanding your own journey and the supporting cast that you're pulling along the way. So thank you for helping me carve myself into a slightly better authentic leader, and with showing up with higher integrity, and hopefully being a role model for those that are willing to listen and watch or witness. So grateful. Thank you all for listening. This has been another amazing episode of Wisdom, Wealth, and Wellness. Subscribe where you get your podcasts, at Apple or Spotify or Google, wherever they distribute, YouTube. So thanks again, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Have a happy, healthy 2026.
At Satovsky Asset Management, we believe refined wealth deserves refined service. As fiduciaries, our mission is to protect and grow your wealth through disciplined advice, hyper-personal service, and multi-generational trust. Our clients stay because we don't oversell. We simply over-deliver.